New year, new brand. Congrats to the Center City Business Association.
Cheers to
Cheers
Center City Business Association.
and all its members.
Raising a glass to the Center City Business Association. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Center City Business Association. We love you.
Wishing all good things for the Center City Business Association.
Congratulations.
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 3 cheers.
Good afternoon, everyone. We want to welcome you to our first event as Center City Business Association. We are so happy you could join us today for this inaugural event. I'm Suzette Munley, the president of the new Center City Business Association. We are excited to be here with you with our new name and brand. It is very fitting to have Paul Levy as today's speaker so we can all hear more about the state of Center City and its recovery. I want to thank you, our members and guests, for your continued support through the pandemic. We are very appreciative and we can't wait to see everyone in person next month. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, for 44 years, our mission has been twofold: to support the success of business owners and the economic vitality of Center City. Our purpose is to better our city for everyone. The diverse voices in our community are what help us realize our full potential. We know the opportunities and challenges in Philadelphia. By sharing that knowledge, we ensure you are prepared to make your next business decision. Our speakers, members, and guests provide a wealth of expertise and Philly know-how. We don't just pass along information, we facilitate long-lasting relationships and foster cooperation among Philadelphia businesses. We are Center City centric. By elevating Center City, we make a lasting effect on all of Philadelphia. We provide opportunity to our business community to have access to the highest caliber speakers and resources to succeed. We educate our community. We know that knowledge is power. We promote the growth and development of Philadelphia businesses. And we embrace differences and grow from each other's experiences. Uplifting the voices of others creates a vibrant environment ripe for collaboration and advancement. So please reach out to Ben if you are interested in becoming a member, a sponsor, or collaborating with Center City Business Association. You can also find a link posted in the chat. Now to mark your calendars for our upcoming events. They are posted on your screen. Our next lunch with the city leaders is with the city controller, Rebecca Reinhardt, on March 29th. We have 2 in-person events planned next month: Women Changing the City on March 16th and Meet the Developers on the 23rd. We really hope to see you there in person. For today's event, we encourage you to use the chat to ask questions or comment and to connect with each other. And you can also find a link to today's program there. I'd like to acknowledge our sustaining sponsor and preferred benefits provider, Michael Craig of Penworth Financial Services. You can learn more at penworth.com. And Lunch with the City's Leaders is made possible by Citizens Bank and our sponsors, the Community College of Philadelphia, Friedman LLP, KYW News Radio, Lev Lane, Pico, Post Brothers, and Visit Philadelphia. Now, to say a few words and introduce our speaker, please welcome Dr. Guy Generals, President of Community College of Philadelphia.
Thank you, Suzette, and thank you, Center City Business Association, for all that you do. We're very proud to be a part of the association. Community College of Philadelphia is proud to support this event series and appreciate the opportunity to meet all of you. We can't wait till we see you in person. I am happy and ecstatic over the fact that this is day 2 of our back to campus activities, in-person activities, and the excitement on the campus is quite palpable. So I believe everyone is excited and optimistic about where we're heading with this pandemic. The college is celebrating this month's Black History, and we encourage everyone to participate in a meaningful way, whether economic, cultural, or educational. We have a whole website that outlines the wide variety of events that are being held during the few weeks of February for Black History Month. Because today's speaker is a leader in keeping the vibrancy of the city's economic core, I want to strongly encourage you to support Black-owned businesses and other local businesses year-round. The college, through its Power Up Your Business and 10 KSB Small Businesses program, are working every day with businesses and entrepreneurs located here in Center City, as well as the city at large, as well as the region. Helping these drivers of your local economy has both economic and social benefits as well. Many of you may be business owners, and we would certainly welcome your participation in CCP's business support programs. The college's Black History Month website features Black-owned businesses that have gone through both our programs, and most of whom have endured through the last 2 years of the pandemic. So please support them. I also want to put in a pitch for you to take advantage of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Institute workshops of our Corporate Solutions Unit to support efforts at your organization to create stronger work environments that are inclusive and supportive of the vast differences we all bring to the table in our work environment. If you are interested, Carol LaFries and members of our staff are here to speak to you about these training opportunities. We also host teach-in sessions year-round about issues affecting minority communities and the community at large through our Enough is Enough initiatives. These sessions are open to the public, and past topics have included environmental justice, myths about the COVID-19 vaccine, and gun violence. Please learn more at ccp.edu/enough. So now it is my honor to introduce today's speaker. Paul is the founding chief executive of the Philadelphia Center City District, serving in that capacity since January of 1991. The CCD is a business improvement district with a $29 million annual operating budget, which supplements municipal services with programs for security, hospitality, cleaning, place marketing and planning, and business retention and attractions for Center City. The CCD has also financed and carried out $152 million in streetscape lighting and facade improvements, including the transformation of 4 downtown parks that are now managed and programmed by the CCD. Paul serves on the board of the convention and the Visitors Bureau, and teaches in the Graduate City Planning Department at Penn. He holds a master's and PhD from Columbia University. His biography is in the program emailed to you earlier, and a link is posted in the chat. So please join me with a warm virtual round of applause for Paul Levy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Dr. General. So let me quickly share my screen and make sure everybody can see it, and then we'll get underway. And then congratulations, obviously, to the new Center City Business Association, or your new name, for a long-standing and really active organization. Can people see the screen at this point? Okay.
Yes.
What I'd like to do is kind of talk about not only where we are, but what we need to do to accelerate the process of recovery that we've been in. I think many of you know that we have been releasing for more than a year now a monthly recovery report that tracks many different indicators of the downtown economy. The bottom line here is, I think we all know, we lost 120,000 jobs at the beginning of the pandemic, and we've regained 66,000 of those. But this has been a very slow but steady recovery, and we are still 57,500 jobs below where we were in February. We've regained 53% of the jobs that were lost in the first 2 months of the pandemic, but important to put this in the context that the 11 county region has regained 78% and the nation is over 80%. The biggest losses, as I think we all know now, were in leisure, hospitality, and restaurants, which were, as of the end of last year, were still down 28%. But many other sectors, including the education sector, down 10%, healthcare down 4.5%, and the office sector down 4.5%. So disproportionately affected hospitality, but many, many other sectors have still not fully recovered. And while office workers continue to work remotely and firms are paying rent, we've seen an office occupancy here in Center City of actual people in the office at about 35 to 40%, and that's probably 3 to 4 days a week. The smaller the firm, the higher the level of occupancy, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But what that has caused is a slow drifting upward of the vacancy number in Center City. So we started at about 11%. We've now risen to about 18.3%. In January, we did a survey of more than 240 firms, and we got about a 44% response rate. And we heard back from 114 businesses and organizations about how they looked at the future. And I want to just quickly highlight this. You can find this on our website as well. But this was in the first 3 weeks of January. We were still in the peak of Omicron, but you can see that a quarter of businesses were fully remote at that time. About 30% were in 1 to 2 days a week, 26% in 4 to 5 days a week, and 18% in 3 days a week. As people looked forward, about only 8% thought they would have a directive to work from home. But if you can look at those next two bars, much was given to the employee to make their own decision, with 37% of firms requiring a minimum number of days in the office. And that largely settled around 3 days a week as the average. People obviously are still tentative about what's going on, but most people believe that their current position is subject to change, but they believe that a greater share of remote work is here to stay, 20% seeking still to get back to that 5-day work week. What's most interesting, and none of this will be terribly surprising, but I think we have to interpret this. What was the major reason for staying remote, continuing health concerns? Again, this was in mid-January. The third one still is a major factor. Uncertainty about schools and childcare really limited people's ability to go to work. But if you look at that second point, this large discussion about the increased leverage that employees have in negotiations at this point. The fourth point about crime and safety and public safety ranked lower, but scratch beneath the surface and you'll hear that concern articulated by many people. And I want to talk about that a little bit later. Obviously, the major advantages were very clear to employers: face-to-face meetings and collaboration, better ability to supervise and mentor staff, professional development. So people still see, and firms still see, a compelling reason to be in the office. As people looked ahead, you could look at this as a positive story that 79% of firms who responded said they would keep the same office footprint or expand it, with only 21% saying they were going to be reducing it. But the concerning number was when you looked at the firms over 200, 40% or at the time said they thought they would reduce their footprint. Now, I'll come back to that point as well. The really good news that's emanating out of University City is this huge continued growth in life sciences, biotech lab space, and buildings are actually being built on spec to meet that demand. There's a notable, but I want to say not substantial, long-term impact in Center City. This is good for the city. It's good for architects and professional services firms who will serve those firms. There are a handful of outposts where life sciences are in Center City, but clearly the issue of proximity to Penn, to Children's Hospital, to Drexel, and to Jefferson really will determine where those lab spaces go. Office workers were on a very steady course of coming back until Omicron hit. And then you can see clearly that SEPTA ridership, after going up, started to come down. Something's going a little crazy. Somebody else operating my screen at this point? I think that may be. Hang on one second. We have. I'm not sure what's happening here. Somebody is fast advancing my screen. I can't talk that fast. I know I can't. Okay.
Okay.
Let me come back again and start again. Apologies. Give me 30 seconds.
Do you have control of it?
I'm not sure I do. Let me stop share and then reshare. All right, let me try one more time. I am not sure what has just occurred here. Let me.
We can see now, so.
All right, you're seeing my screen again now?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I won't start at the beginning again. I'll get.
Okay.
Sorry about that. All right, so we were on this course until Omicron hit, of office workers returning. And somebody else needs to mute. Clearly, we saw SEPTA ridership rising and then declining in December, the same with PATCO, and the same with off-street parking, which was doing quite well, but then started to decline. On the totally good news front, and I think we've seen this, the citywide volume of home sales remained very, very strong. Sales prices continued to rise, and there was no flight from the city, which I think many people feared. Focusing on what we call Greater Center City, the area from Girard to Tasker, river to river, housing production rebounded in 2021, meeting a steady supply, and that continued growth on up into Fishtown, Kensington, Point Breeze, a great deal of housing activity, with 62% of all development occurring in about 17% of the area of the city. So demand has long been driven by the concentration of jobs and strong transit connectivity, although many more people have been working remotely. Developer confidence has remained incredibly strong. Both the Laurel and Art House have now topped out. Jefferson has moved forward with their 19-story specialty care pavilion. Parkway is moving forward at 2022 Market Street for a new headquarters for Morgan Lewis that has topped out. PMC has 2 new residential towers along the Schuylkill. Brandywine is breaking ground on their mixed-use lab and apartment building. And each day there are new projects that continue to be announced. On the good news front, this is really part of something we've done so well for the last 20 years. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we were a 9-to-5 office district. Today, we are a highly diversified live, work, education, play, entertainment downtown, which was disrupted by the pandemic. Now, Center City retail and restaurants have been steadily building back from June of 2020. Clearly, streeteries were a great sign of vitality through the pandemic. They were an essential lifeline through the winter time. And this report we put out in January, I think, tells a really positive story. You can see in June of 2020, fully a third of retailers and restaurants were closed and boarded up. And that very quickly shrank so that we're down to 2.5%. The flip side is vacancy rose from 11% to almost 18% in December. But if you look back on the last year and a half, 2 years, we had 125 new retail business establishments open in Center City, public announcements of 28 planning to open in 2022, and the numbers keep continuing as businesses are coming in, replacing businesses we've lost, but that trend is very positive at this point. Now, all these businesses depend on foot traffic, and we track foot traffic in multiple ways. This tells a really interesting story. On the left side is the pre-pandemic. You see a 76% drop in pedestrian volume, but that teal line are visitors and shoppers, convention goers, people throughout the region, and we are back to 84% of pre-pandemic levels in Center City. Residents briefly dipped down, but we're at the same level, if not more, Center City residents walking around. You can see that this significant challenge remains that office workers are at 41% of pre-pandemic levels. So putting that in comparison, the average day in Center City in 2019 was about 428,000 people on the streets. We averaged 238,000 in 2021. That is a 62% recovery rate. December was much stronger just before Omicron. You see this, we have individual counters on the street, and without going into a lot of detail, Chestnut, Walnut was back up to 70 and 80%. West Market and JFK was in the 30 to 40% range of pre-pandemic levels. And I want to zero in on this because when office workers work remotely or don't come back, that has a significant impact on building engineers, on janitors, on security positions. It has a significant impact on business travel. And then all of the smaller businesses, the hair salons, the nail salons, the shoemakers, the dry cleaners, the restaurants. So those people who have the option to work remotely, when they do, it has significant economic impact on those who don't have the option to work remotely. We see this really clearly in restaurant volumes and sales. This is taxable income in the core of the downtown. By the third quarter, was back up to 80% of pre-pandemic levels, but in the adjacent neighborhoods where people were now home 7 days a week, restaurant sales were at 95% level. So we've had a differential recovery even within Center City. I do get tired of going to meetings where I hear CEOs and managing partners saying, we'll come back, but the restaurant on the ground floor of our office building is closed. And I always ask them, who is the chicken and who is the egg here? And you can solve that riddle as office workers and CEOs and managing partners make the decision to return. When urging people to come back, Mayor Adams in New York basically polemically said, you can't run New York City from home. But he made the very substantive point that the absence of high wage workers undermines the economic ecosystem that supports lower wage and moderate wage workers who don't have the luxury to work remotely. So I certainly started to urge business leaders, obviously, to do what's prudent with regard to health. But for those firms who are back, to start calling those firms who are remote to talk not only about how much better it is to be back, but the economic impact, the external benefits of having businesses return to Center City. Now, let's acknowledge what we've done incredibly well. Our vaccination rates among those 65 and older, among those 18 and older, are dramatically higher than they were a year ago and when this process started. Boosters are now widely distributed, and breakthrough cases have been more like an annoying flu than like a scary death sentence at this point. So COVID's not going to be eliminated, but I believe, and I think we need to think about it as something that can be managed. Performing arts institutions have now successfully reopened. Conventions and trade shows are coming back. There's a lot of positive bookings for this year, which is beginning to drive recovery in hotel rooms, and the projections are steadily getting better through 23 into 24. The universities who mandated vaccination and having their college students return to classrooms before Omicron, I think, was really a key move. Both Penn and Drexel, I know, did this. They had their employees back a minimum of 3 days a week, and that had an incredible positive benefit on pedestrian vitality, retail sales, and enhanced safety. The other barrier I talked about before is obviously while children are back in school, as long as we're dealing with the on again, off again, needing to shut down, that's going to be a destabilizing factor. But hopefully both with the increase in vaccination and what we hope is the receding of this strain without another one right behind it, I think bodes well for employers' ability to have employees come back. SEPT has done a remarkable job in cleaning and rebuilding confidence in transit and enhancing safety. And we have stayed out there. Our primary role has been the public environment. Talk about stability of taxation. The real estate tax is a much more reliable tax than the wage tax. We collected 98% of our revenues last year. That enabled to have all of our staff stay on street 7 days a week, 3 shifts a day. So every one of our staff have been out there. We added cleaners to take on additional graffiti removal functions, hiring returning citizens and recovering homeless individuals. Our public safety staff have been deployed 7 days a week. And a partnership effort that we have had with Project Home and the Philadelphia Police Department, which Sister Mary Scullion calls the Ambassadors of Hope, partners police who are crisis intervention trained with Project Home staff, with our staff in a co-delivery of services. SEPTA is doing that, partnering drug and alcohol workers with police. And this is the model we need to think about as we rebuild policing, not police alone, not social service alone, but blended teams. We've had a very high rate of success in getting people off the street. We transport them and connect them to services. Now, because safety grew to be such a concern over the last 2 years, we added a new bike patrol team out on the street. We have 8 defined patrol beats for bike patrol, unarmed individuals out on the street, but 15 officers, 7 days a week, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that has been to add a public safety presence. Mayor Kenny and the police commissioner have stepped forward with additional police deployment, a much greater coordination with the private sector, and a return to the basic principles of community policing. Officers walking on the street, stopping in to talk to businesses and building managers, giving out business cards with their cell phone. That connectivity, that reconnecting of police to the community is important citywide. The partnering with mental health and drug alcohol teams is important citywide, but we know the type of models we need to have to rebuild policing. We work closely with the police on pedestrian counts, so they knew where the maximum activities were. And this increased coordination of a public safety presence is key to the revival of every commercial corridor within the city. Through our foundation, we raised money to just do some basic things on Walnut Street, which had been severely damaged in June 2020. So holiday decorations, Valentine's Day decorations. And we are working on a number of projects simply to improve the physical appearance of Center City. By June, we will be installing all new planters along the bike lanes, along sidewalks in partnership with building owners. Again, part of sending a message that Center City is steadily getting better. We continued to program our 4 parks. We continued to have arts, culture, and programming for children. We really increased the presence of Black and brown businesses in our markets this year, women-owned businesses, and attracted 7 million people to Dilworth Park in 2021. That was 70% of our pre-pandemic levels. What's most exciting for us is when you look at where those people came from, 57% from the city, about 20% from the suburbs, but coming from every single neighborhood within the city. We've really turned this into a transit-oriented park at the center of the city. So let me end with some themes around how we accelerate the safe return to office, because I believe, frankly, as important as every other sector is, these buildings are the densest containers of the most diverse jobs in the city, and they are the drivers of many other jobs in an ecosystem that they support. Our recovery has been slow. As you can see, we've recovered 89% of jobs. Many other cities have recovered more jobs. We were one of the slowest growing major cities going into the pandemic, and now is the moment to get things right. As we rebound, we've got to fix underlying problems, whether it was the lack of access to financing for Black and brown businesses or a tax structure that depresses job growth. This is the moment to get things right. The city has recognized their vulnerability due to wage and business tax dependency. And I don't want to be a broken record, but this is the moment to focus on how we reduce that wage tax, how we lower the burden on low wage workers, how we lower the barriers for people coming back to work, and how we create a favorable environment for businesses large and small to grow. This is also a moment, and we've been experimenting with running ads in the New York City market to really begin to capitalize on what we see at our great strengths, the quality of our workspace and amenities, a much better live-work balance within the city, much shorter commute times. So we've built a website called phillyworks.com. We've been advertising in the New York City market. We've been on LinkedIn. We've been on New Jersey Transit. We spent a lot of money more as ego gratification to be in the Wall Street Journal, but we were in the Wharton magazine as well. And we've added the Acela for January and February. We'll be on the Metro liner to communicate about the great advantages. If you're going to work remotely, choose to work remotely in Philadelphia, move your business or open a branch here. So we're looking to expand support for business attraction, seeking sponsorship from owners, brokers, and co-working spaces. So some closing thoughts. Vaccinated people were not afraid to be in bars and restaurants, and they accepted the vaccine mandate, which we now know has been removed. Audiences have been returning to the Kimmel Center. Fans returned to the Link. Unfortunately, the Eagles didn't after the playoffs, but clearly people were glad to be back in public spaces. So what's the problem with offices? Where so safe social distancing is far easier to achieve. I think we need to come out of our Zoom foxholes and restore a sense of civic commitment to the city, not to minimize health and childcare problems, but we need collectively as business leaders to send a signal about the importance about coming back. If we want a vibrant and competitive city, a city that restores jobs, reduces poverty, and creates opportunity, it's time for business leaders to lead and get the maximum number of office workers back. As I suggested, if you run a law firm and you know a larger law firms that's not back, call your colleagues and talk about the importance of coming back. A vaccinated city is a safer city. We're not going to make COVID vanish, but we now know with the high rates of vaccination and other protocols, we can live with it and guard against it. It needs to be part of our protocols, but we also know we can function as a vibrant economy as this moves from the pandemic to the endemic stage. We still hold 53% of all jobs in Center City and University City. Those jobs generate many other related jobs. So quite simply, the recovery of the entire city depends on an accelerated recovery here in Center City. And I invite all of you to help carry that message as we move forward. So let me stop there and really open it to questions. All these statistics are available on our website. But again, congratulations to you on the rebranding and repositioning. And certainly at the CCD, we really look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for the congratulations, but especially for everything you're doing, the research and the programs. So far I see a couple questions in chat. It seems like there's a high level of vacancy on Walnut and other higher and retail corridors. Are there specific activities going in? What is the plan for the Bellevue? And anything else you want to elaborate on?
Sure. And let's not lose sight of West Walnut in particular was the site of vandalism, looting, and arson, and that had a major negative impact. That street is clearly in very strong recovery at this point. Many new places are opening. The Bellevue is planned. Lupert Adler has purchased that and will be fully renovating that. As anybody who's in construction knows, from the time you sign a lease till you execute the lease, till you do the renovation, 6 months, 8 months can go by. So there's a great deal of positive activity that's in the pipeline that hasn't emerged. The other thing to remember is at least 25 to 30% of the closings in Center City were not as a result of the failure of the Philadelphia market. These were national chains that went out of business or closed. So I don't want to minimize the adverse impact, but there was a lot of closures from major folks who were already overextended, and COVID really pushed them over the edge. So if you haven't been in Center City in 2 years, you'll walk on the streets and say, oh my God, it's nowhere near what it used to be. If you walked on the streets of Center City in June of 2020, you know how much progress we have made.
You touched on this a little bit in your closing remarks, but someone was asking if you could address the messages that employers are sending to their employees about the benefits of coming back to the office and whether there is resistance to those messages. What are employee attitudes about returning to the office? And I guess, is there more of what we can do to, like you said, talk to our colleagues about having them bring back people?
Look, I think I want to be clear that the genie is out of the bottle. Remote work is possible. Technology makes that possible in many ways. At the same time, I mean, I find this in our own organization, and we're back 4 days a week. And I can meet with my staff on a screen like this and I see heads nodding. But any of you who work with a team of people know that there's a lot of unspoken body language that happens in meetings when you can see that somebody, they're not really on board, but they're not speaking up. And so simply the advantages of being together, all of those obviously very nice bumping into people at the water cooler in the corridor, of having conversations. Those are unquantifiable, but really key. I think every employee has gotten very accustomed to having control of their own work schedule again. That's been this isn't about remote work versus in-office work. This is, I want to control the time at which I work and when I work. And I understand that. I have those same sentiments myself. But I clearly think the benefits of being back together are really key. So yes, I mean, let's separate employee resistance, the parent with the 4-year-old whose daycare center is closed. That's legitimate resistance, okay? The employee who, I just really don't want to be there today. We have pushed through that. We found that when we brought people back last September, when we moved to 4 days a week, there was some resistance. We did a bunch of events in the office. Everybody was glad to see their colleagues, and we worked through that. After 18 months, I lost 5% of our employees. If you look at a normal turnover over 18 months, you're going to lose some people, but I would not be afraid to lose employees. I think there is some need to stay flexible, but the importance of getting workers back for the productivity of firms and for the economic impact of the city, I think is really key.
So those are the only questions I have in chat, but I'm willing to open it up to anyone who's not a hacker.
We had one hacker already, right?
Oh, I have a comment, question.
Sure, David. Sure.
Yeah. First of all, excellent presentation.
Thanks.
I'm not astounded, but I am astounded at the work you guys have done in the last year. It is very, very impressive, I have to say. It's very, very impressive, and it's great. One of the things that, so I have a question. Like one issue is productivity in business. I've heard a lot from owners of businesses that they've had good revenue and good sales during this time when their employees are working from home. They've made budgets, and that's an easier thing because at 8 o'clock in the morning, instead of getting on the train, they go into their bedrooms or their home offices, and they put more time in at work. And that's a tough one to overcome. But my question really is, the advertising that you have done up in the New York area, has that produced anything interesting? And why haven't we considered, and maybe you have, putting that emotion and enthusiasm into promoting in and around the Philadelphia area to get folks to come back?
Well, let me deal with the first part, which is, I mean, I've talked to a lot of major employers who have come back, who basically are saying, clearly we were able to function, our productivity was good, but we were not doing the peak, excellent, highly competitive work we would do if we were all together. So there's no doubt that working hybrid or working remote is viable. And I want to be clear, there are some functions that are very easily done. And if you run a call center, I'm not sure why you need to be back in the office, right? But there are clearly functions that work best, not when everybody's just staying in their own lane, but when they're bumping into, colliding, interacting with people in other departments that they haven't even thought about contacting. So that serendipitous, that accidental, to me, is part of the real creativity that emerges. So I think again, I want to be realistic. We're going to have people continuing to work remotely, but I don't think we start from the premise, oh, it's all remote and there's no reason to push and lean in and ask people to be back more. I think we have done a certain amount. We've done certainly consumer advertising about promoting being back in the city. We're certainly, we've done several restaurant weeks through this, and we'll be having some announcements next week about additional promotions we're doing. But I really want to focus my energy beyond consumer marketing into this issue of business marketing. So yeah, we need, and I think the best way to do that in Philadelphia is law firm A calls law firm B, right? Or accountant A calls accountant B. To answer your other question, it's clear that what we're doing now is simply imagery in New York City. We don't have an aggressive attraction campaign. We're trying to just get Philadelphia on the radar screen. So it's really premature. We've had a lot of visits to the website, but we have not really converted yet because everybody's still in a holding pattern. I think this recovery, if things go as well as we would like to hope over the next 2 to 3 months, absent another variant, I think that's the real opportunity to get people back, to begin business attraction, but to get out of playing defense.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to?
Ben, Chris Hager.
Hey, Chris,
Hi, Mike.
go ahead.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Chris.
So we've heard you preach for many, many years, right? Clean, safe, and lit.
Right.
And without question, I take the train in every day. The amount of graffiti is unbelievable on the train corridors and other places in the city. Obviously, crime up and just overall safety. And then I see the reports on lights, not being replaced. So, is this a budget issue? Is it sort of taking our eye off the ball? Is it a little of both? And then you raised the chicken and egg issue before. I mean, this is almost sort of a chicken and egg if it's a budget issue. What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
Well, Chris, lots of questions. Let me try to pull a couple strands out of those questions. Let me just deal with the bigger issue, which I thought I saw in the chat as well, about the fear of crime. Okay. I mean, statistically, the level of crime in Center City in 2021 was lower than the level of crime in 2019. Okay. There were less people here as well. Okay. The huge impact of gun violence on the neighborhoods in which it occurred has really been awful. And the media coverage of that has put a dark cloud over the entire city and region. So people start with, oh my God, Philadelphia is a city where everyone's getting shot. And clearly that's a huge problem within a limited number of neighborhoods. I think secondly, there have been some incidents of hijacking of cars, which were highly visible and gave anxiety to people. But fundamentally, I mean, let me just say that the number of homeless people on the streets of Center City is less than it was in 2019, but the number of everybody else was a lot less, so individuals stood out more. When retail stores were closed, there was nobody to say in the morning, please move out of the doorway. So what I say is that crime is down and anxiety is up. All right, so let's start with that. I think from a budget point of view, obviously the city faced challenges and COVID affected lots of frontline workers, whether it was sanitation or police. And I alluded to the need that we have to rebuild a new model of policing and what I think many people are looking to see in Philadelphia, which is what people call the Eric Adams Coalition, which was when working class neighborhoods, white and black, come together and say, we believe in clean and safe. No one wants to be assaulted by a racist and violent police officer, but we want safe policing. We want policing that's attentive. And that's the work that we need to do to rebuild. So, there's been shortage of resources on the city side. There's been diminished staffing in some departments, but I think we're at a point where we can begin to see a rebuilding. I don't want to minimize. I mean, I'm on the same neighborhood chat sites as everybody else, and those can be really bad for your spirit if you're on them because the report levels are high of incidents. But I think getting people back on the street, rebuilding city departments is absolutely key to recovery. And as I say to my staff all the time, some of whom weren't born then, we did this once in 1990. We just have to do it all over again in 2022. And that's where we are now. It's 1990 all over again with a whole lot more assets to activate.
Thanks, Paul, and don't take that as a knock on Center City District.
No.
You continue to do amazing work there, and
Right.
thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome, but clearly it's a challenge that everybody's facing at this point.
So we have a question, if you could comment on or what you recommend about taxes. What do you recommend we do to advance the ideas of reduction of wage and business taxes? Is there a message that could be developed and sent to all council people documenting why this is important?
Yeah, and I think clearly, I mean, we will have folks who've been working on a committee reach out directly to you, Ben, if they haven't yet. But let me just start with some factual points, okay? 35% of the working residents of every council district are reverse commuting to the suburbs and have been for the last 10 years. All right, so think about that. I live in a neighborhood, working class, middle class. I'm reverse commuting to the suburbs. I am paying the Philadelphia 3.8% wage tax, and I am working alongside a suburban resident who's paying a 1% wage tax, doing the same job I'm doing, and somehow or other they seem to have better schools out there, right? That is a huge incentive, and we continue to lose the white and African-American middle class to the suburbs for that reason. If you live in the suburbs and work in the suburbs, you pay a 1% wage tax. If you live in the suburbs and move into the city or work in the city, you're paying a 3.4% wage tax. So number one is do no harm. Do not raise the suburban wage tax again. That's a fatal sort of step to go. And by the way, these numbers work both ways. 35% of the workers in every council district are suburbanites commuting into those districts, not just Center City, citywide. We are a region that's interconnected. So clearly, I think we need to move on a path where we accelerate wage tax reduction. We accelerate the cuts to the net income portion of the business income and receipts tax. We're at a moment where it's going to be a little painful, but clearly the success of the housing market citywide are going to lead to rising assessments. That will help offset things, but there will be a decline in assessment in hotels and in office buildings downtown. But we need to set the course of getting that wage tax below 3% and getting the net income portion of the business income and receipts tax cut in half, and learn to rely more on the more stable real estate tax. That to me is the direction. This is what the 2003 Tax Commission said. It's what the 2009 Tax Committee said. And there is a working group now. And then I'll make sure folks from all of the chambers who are meeting around this reach out to you, because they do have a plan which is based on faster, more inclusive job growth, the growth of Black and brown business, medium and large businesses. And that's the path. You know, when you are the sixth largest city with the highest poverty rate among all major cities, there's something wrong with how we are managing our economy.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great if you can send us that.
Sure.
Any significant capital projects the CCD is planning?
Yeah, we've got a couple of things in the pipeline right now. Some of them are smaller scale. One is that effort I already alluded to of just greening the bike lanes in the office district. We are working in partnership with SEPTA, the plaza between 1515 Market and 2 Penn Center, which now has a beer garden in it, but has those two awful entrances to the suburban station. We are working on plans to physically improve those to create a more attractive entrance to the regional rail line. We are working in Jewelers Road to kind of create permanent streeteries down there and really improve the quality of the connection of Jewelers Road to Independence Mall. And then we have a couple of other projects that involve both South Broad lighting and City Hall lighting that are in the early stages. But, clean and safe is clearly part of it. A competitive business structure is part of it, but continually showing physical improvements, I think, are clearly part of it as well.
And the SEPTA concourse?
Yeah, well, let me just say that Patco, for those of you who've been affected by 15th and Locust and the Patco concourse, Patco and the city are working on closing portions of that off. So it's only a transit concourse and not a residence for people. SEPTA has fairly good plans for the concourse. Those have been put on hold, obviously, during the pandemic. They're back up, as I said, to 50% ridership, but the minute we can get their ridership higher, they've got the capital budget now to be doing a whole series of improvements down there. But I want to be clear, it's a rebuilding process here that we need to go through. There's not a switch you flip back on and it's 2019 all over again.
Right. Anyone else? Last chance for a question. Okay. So with that, Paul, I just want to thank you again for doing this with us every once in a while. And
good luck to all of you. And clearly, sometimes you just need to walk forward, even if you don't see the path in front of you, right? But that's what you got to do to keep moving forward. And I think that's the essential part of what we need to do now.
Right. So we'll all start telling everybody that we work with to have the meetings downtown and bring employees back. And we're trying to get our events in person as soon as possible and have two planned for next month.
Yeah, and try when you have meetings to eliminate the remote option and see what happens.
Excellent. So thank you again. I just want to thank our sponsors and everybody for coming. If you do want to stay on and network for a little, we can break into some breakout rooms. Otherwise, we'll see you at our next upcoming event.
Thanks very much for the invitation. Great.
Thanks, Paul.
Great job, Paul.
Thank you.